Imagine, in the middle of the sea, there is a small island, and beneath it, something is hidden that someone went to great lengths to protect. They built underground passages, redirected seawater into those passages, and created a system that is still not easy to break even today. More than 200 years have passed. People have spent their money, machines, and even their lives trying to solve this mystery. So far, 6 people have died. Excavations have uncovered old wood, coconut fibers, tiny traces of gold, pieces of parchment, and remains that appear to be human bones. But the thing that people have been digging for all these centuries, the treasure chest itself, has still never been found. And this is where the story becomes interesting. Because the question is not just whether there is treasure beneath Oak Island or not. The real question is, who built such a complicated system there in the first place? Why did they build it? And what was the thing they were hiding, for which they even turned the sea itself into a guard? Stay until the end of this story, because the evidence that comes forward next may change the way you look at this entire mystery. But before we move ahead in the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can watch videos like this first. It was the year 1795. Near Nova Scotia, there is a small island that the whole world today knows as Oak Island. The island is not very large, and at that time, thick red oak trees were spread across it. That is also why it was named Oak Island. One summer afternoon, a boy named Daniel McGinnis was walking around one part of the island. Suddenly, he noticed a strange place on the ground. There was a hole about 13 feet wide, but the strangest thing was above the hole. Hanging from a cut branch of an old oak tree was a heavy tackle block, a pulley-like device used on ships. At that time, stories about pirates and hidden treasures were common. Especially about Captain Kidd, people said that he had hidden his treasure somewhere near the sea. So, when a boy saw a hole in the ground with a heavy device used for lifting things above it, it was natural for him to think about treasure. McGinnis came back with his 2 friends, John Smith and Anthony Vaughan. The 3 of them started digging with their shovels and other tools. About 2 feet down, they found a flat layer of stones. These did not look like ordinary stones, and it also did not seem like they had formed. The story of the place where 3 boys started digging in 1795 did not end there. Around 1804, a team called the Enslow Company arrived on Oak Island. This time, they did not have just shovels. They had money, more people, and tools that could dig the old shaft much deeper than before. They started digging the same hole again. As they went deeper, they found wooden platforms again. But this time, some other things also started appearing. Layers of coal, a putty-like material, and then a thick layer of coconut fibers. Now, the coconut fibers were the most surprising thing here. Because coconut trees do not grow in this cold area of Nova Scotia. That means these fibers did not get there on their own. Someone must have brought them from somewhere far away and then used them for some purpose underground. The question was, why? The searchers were now even more convinced that they were not digging in an ordinary hole. At around 90 feet down, they found a flat stone with some strange marks on it. Later, it was claimed that the meaning of these marks was, 2 million pounds are buried 40 feet below. But one thing needs to be clearly understood here. The truth of this supposed translation is still disputed today. It cannot be considered a confirmed historical fact. Still, for the searchers at that time, this was enough. They started believing that the treasure was just within their reach. And then, that same night, they felt something that increased their hope even more. They put an iron rod into the bottom of the hole. Down below, it hit something hard. One thought came to their minds. Treasure chest. They thought they would take it out in the morning. But when they came back the next morning, there was no treasure chest there. The entire hole had filled with around 60 feet of water. And the strangest thing was that the water would not go away. The next morning, when the searchers reached the hole, they were facing a problem they probably had never imagined. The entire hole was filled with water. They thought it was just normal underground water. They installed pumps and started pumping the water out. But the water was not going down. Imagine, you are standing inside a hole nearly 100 feet underground. You think that just a few feet below you is the thing you came here for. You are using all your strength to pump the water out, but as much water as goes out, the same amount of water comes back in. Slowly, the searchers began to suspect that this was not just normal groundwater. Information and structures discovered later pointed toward an even more surprising possibility. It was believed that some hidden channels had been built underground from the direction of Smith's Cove, which could bring seawater toward the shaft. Near Smith's Cove, artificial beach-like structures, coconut fibers, eelgrass, layers of sand, and stones were also found. Looking at all of these things, the possibility came forward that a filtering and drainage-like system had been created to send seawater underground in a particular direction. Now imagine that hole once again. You are digging underground. You think the treasure is right in front of you. Suddenly, seawater starts entering your excavation through some hidden passage. You pump it out, and the sea sends more water back in. That is why this place was so difficult to defeat. It would not be correct to say that this was definitely built to protect some treasure, but the available evidence points toward a deliberately engineered flood system. And this was the moment when Oak Island was no longer just a story about a buried treasure. Now it had become an engineering mystery, and the question was bigger than ever. Who built it in the first place? The 1804 expedition lost the battle against the water, but Oak Island did not end people's hope. Instead, after every failure, a new company and a new team kept arriving with the belief that the previous team had simply made a mistake. Someone dug a new shaft near the old money pit. Someone tried to build a tunnel to reach underneath it. Someone looked for a way to stop the water from the other side, but as soon as they went deeper, the water would stand in front of them again. Sometimes a tunnel would collapse, sometimes the pumps would stop working, and sometimes an entire section of the excavation would sink down. Then people tried to stop the water from the direction of Smith's Cove. Dams were built, digging was done, and they tried to understand where exactly the seawater was coming from. They started finding signs of not just one passage, but several possible channels. But humans were not ready to give up either. Heavy steam-powered pumps were installed. Later, even dynamite was used. People invested their savings, borrowed money from others, and continued digging with hope. During this time, they sometimes found things that brought the story back to life. A small piece of parchment, carved wood, part of a chain, and some other small objects. But one thing was always missing: the treasure chest. And here, Oak Island's strangest irony appears. Every new generation thought that the previous team had dug in the wrong place. So they started from a new location. But by doing this again and again, they created so many tunnels and shafts underground that it became difficult to even figure out where the original money pit was. In other words, the very place people had come to search for was slowly changed so much by the searchers that its original form itself was lost. The treasure still had not been found, but people were not going to stop. Time passed, but the mystery of Oak Island did not disappear. In 1849, searchers thought that instead of going down into the same hole again and again, it would be better to drill into the ground and see what was down there. This time, instead of digging, they used an auger, a drilling tool, so that some of the material from below could be brought to the surface. The drill slowly went deeper into the ground. According to accounts from the old expedition, it first passed through a spruce wood platform. After that, an empty space was found. Then came a layer of loose metal-like material. After that, wood, then metal again, then spruce wood once more, and finally soft clay. Now, for the people who were there at the time, all of this was a very big sign. In these old descriptions, the pieces of metal were understood as possible coins. In other words, people thought that maybe the drill had passed through an area where coins or some kind of metal treasure was lying. And then another famous detail was added to the story. It was said that when the drill was pulled out, 3 small gold chain links could be seen on it among the mud. Hearing this makes it sound like they had come extremely close to finding the treasure. But it is important to stop here. These 3 links were never independently confirmed. The story was repeated many times later, and it is also not certain that they were actually made of gold. Still, at that time, this was enough. Oak Island was no longer just a matter of interest for the people living nearby. The story started reaching newspapers and public discussions. The mysterious hole on a small island had now become a subject of discussion on a much larger scale. A supposed platform, some pieces of metal, and 3 suspicious gold links gave people's imagination even more fuel. The local mystery was becoming a national obsession, and soon the whole world would be talking about Oak Island. One of the scariest chapters in the story of Oak Island came in the year 1965. By that time, people had already spent their wealth and years of their lives chasing this mystery. But now, the price was going to become much higher. At that time, a team was pumping water out of a shaft. A gasoline engine was being used to run the pump. The people working below had no idea how dangerous the engine's fumes could be inside a deep and closed shaft. After some time, one man became trapped below and could not come back up. Other people went down to rescue him, but the poisonous gases there, especially fumes like carbon monoxide, made the situation even worse. One after another, people were affected by them. When the rescue attempt was over, a total of 4 people had lost their lives in the accident. In this more than 200-year-old search, people had already lost their lives before. And now, the number of deaths brought an old Oak Island story back into discussion. It was said that the treasure of the island would not be found until 7 people had died. Remember, this is only an old legend. There is no scientific or historical proof for it. But as people continued repeating the story and the number of deaths kept increasing, the coincidence started to feel frightening. By now, 6 people had died in connection with the Oak Island treasure hunt. 6 out of 7. So was the next one going to be the 7th, or was there never any curse in this story at all? Maybe the real danger was much more ordinary, and because of that, much more frightening. It was human obsession, deep, water-filled ground, poisonous gases, collapsing tunnels, and people who kept going into the same darkness, believing each time that they were smarter than the people before them. Oak Island did not need a curse. Human ambition and underground engineering were enough. By now, one thing was clear. There was definitely something beneath Oak Island that was not easy to understand. But the biggest question was still the same. Who built it in the first place? The first name that comes up is Captain Kidd. He was hanged in 1701, and for a long time, stories had been told that he had hidden treasure somewhere after looting it at sea. So, when digging began on Oak Island, people thought that maybe Kidd's treasure was here. But the problem is that for a pirate, building such complicated flood tunnels and an underground system does not seem like an easy explanation. Then the story reaches the Knights Templar. They were a powerful organization of medieval warrior monks that was ended in the early 14th century. According to one theory, some of their treasure or important belongings traveled west with their missing fleet and eventually reached Oak Island. It sounds exciting, but no direct archaeological proof has been found to support it. Another strange theory is connected to Francis Bacon. Bacon was an English philosopher and statesman. Some people believed that the famous works known under Shakespeare's name were actually written by Bacon and that his original manuscripts had been secretly hidden somewhere. His interest in preserving documents in Mercury and claims of Mercury, traces being found in the soil of Oak Island, have been connected to this theory. But here too, the story is interesting, while the evidence is not conclusive. And the theories do not end here. Some people have mentioned the Ark of the Covenant, some the jewels of Marie Antoinette, some Aztec gold, and some have even connected the Vikings to Oak Island. But all of these theories have the same biggest problem. Every theory gives a story, but none gives decisive evidence that allows us to say, this is the truth. And perhaps that is exactly what makes Oak Island so mysterious. There is no shortage of questions here. The only thing missing is one solid answer. For 200 years, the same method was used on Oak Island. People would choose a place, start digging there, and when water came in, they would install pumps. And when a tunnel or shaft collapsed, they would try again from another place. Basically, the method was almost always the same: digging, water, pumping, collapse, and finally, failure. But with time, a big change came. A new generation of searchers thought, why not try to understand the ground before breaking into it? Now, technologies like ground-penetrating radar started being used to look for signs of structures underground. Seismic surveys were used to get an idea of empty spaces and different layers below the ground. Sonar was used in water-filled areas, and information from inside the ground was collected through boreholes. Then, with core drilling, small samples of soil and wood were brought up from deep underground. Think of it like this. Imagine a doctor starting an operation directly without using an X-ray or scan. The old searchers were doing something similar. Now, they could scan first, get an idea of what was below, and only then start digging. Core samples also revealed some interesting things. Old wood was found deep underground, along with some objects that pointed toward human activity. Some samples also contained extremely tiny particles of gold. There were also reports of parchment and bone-like material. But caution is important here. Finding tiny particles of gold does not mean that there is a treasure chest there. Finding old wood also does not mean that the wood is from the time of the original structure. Finding a bone does not automatically mean that it belonged to a person who was guarding some treasure. And finding a piece of parchment is not proof of some secret document either. The only difference was that now, the searchers were no longer working blindly. For the first time, they were trying to read the ground before digging into it, and slowly, the ground started giving some answers. Modern technology brought another major twist to the Oak Island story. This time, the searchers were not just looking underground. They started mapping the entire Smith's Cove area in a new way, and here, they saw some things that brought the old questions back again. Layers of coconut fibers were found beneath the sand. In some places, eelgrass was also seen. Along with this, drainage-like structures and some box-like formations were found. These things were located around the normal shoreline, affected by the tides. Now the question was, why were all these things in the same place? If Smith's Cove was just an ordinary beach, it was not easy to understand why these different things were found together in this way. But when they were mapped out, another possibility came forward. Maybe these were not separate things at all. Maybe they were parts of one larger system. The system was imagined something like this. The seawater would first pass through filtering material, then move forward through channels built underground, and finally reach the area where the old shafts and excavation sites were located. In other words, the water was not simply allowed to seep into the ground. It seemed as if its path had been designed to work in a particular direction. But there is one important point here. It should not be called a completely proven fact. The exact date of these structures and the exact purpose of every part can still be a matter of interpretation and debate. Still, The picture was interesting. Someone had not simply made a hole in the ground. It seemed that someone had made the entire shoreline part of a larger engineering system. And this was Oak Island's biggest twist. For the first time, people's attention was not only on what the treasure might be underground. The question was also, if something really had been hidden there, who had built such a huge system to protect it? Because perhaps the real mystery was not the treasure. The real mystery was its supposed security system. A core sample taken from the ground of Oak Island suddenly started taking the whole story in a different direction. The sample contained old wood. At first, this does not seem like a very big deal, because in an area this old and repeatedly excavated, finding wood is possible. But the real question came when people tried to find out its age. If that dating is correct, and the wood is connected to the original construction at that location, then it could be much older than the normal timeline in which the story is told after Europeans arrived there. And this is where a very big question comes up. If humans had already built some kind of wooden structure at that place before Europeans arrived, then who put it there? Until now, the most discussed theories have included names like Captain Kidd and the Knights Templar. But if the wood really turns out to be even older than that, then both of these theories could become weaker. Because then the question would not just be whose treasure it was. The question would be, who was there before them? But it would also be wrong to rush to a conclusion here. Dating old wood is not always as simple as it sounds. The wood may have been cut from a very old tree, but used later. This is called the old wood effect. There could also be contamination in the sample. It is also important to understand the exact context of the place from where the sample was taken, and if a dating result has not been published or independently repeated, then it becomes even harder to consider it final evidence. So, one piece of old wood did not answer the mystery. It simply created a new question. If the date is correct, then the story is even older than we thought, and if the date is wrong or understood in the wrong context, then it proves nothing. So the mystery was not over. Instead, it had become even bigger. Until now, after hearing the story of Oak Island, it may seem like the treasure was probably just about to be found. But it is important to stop for a moment and understand what was actually found and what has only been claimed over the years. First, let us look at the things for which there is at least some solid evidence. Over the last 200 years, many major excavations have taken place on Oak Island. There are clear signs of a huge amount of digging and disturbance underground. The arrival of water from underground is also a real problem. Structures have been found at Smith's Cove that look like some kind of engineered system. Old wood has been found. There have been reports of parchment fragments. Claims of tiny traces of gold have appeared, and human remains or related material have also been reported. 6 people have also died during the long history of this search. But now look at the other side. To this day, no treasure chest has been found that can clearly be identified as Captain Kidd's treasure. The Knights Templar treasure has not been found. The supposed original manuscripts of Shakespeare have not been found. There is also no decisive evidence of the Ark of the Covenant, the jewels of Marie Antoinette, or some huge gold hoard. So the most important point is this. Evidence has been found on Oak Island, but the treasure has still not been definitively identified. Skeptics have their own strong argument. Tiny particles of gold could have come from old excavation work. Old wood could have been used later. A bone could have reached the site for another reason. And it is also not necessary to interpret every structure at Smith's Cove in the same way. But believers also raise one important question. If these structures were not made by humans, then where did these unusual imported materials, coconut fibers, and such a huge construction effort come from? The truth may be somewhere between both sides. Maybe there really is something extraordinary underground. And it is also possible that some evidence has been made much more mysterious than it actually is because of centuries of digging and storytelling. For now, one thing can definitely be said. Oak Island has created more questions than answers. The real mystery. Not the treasure, but the creator. For more than 200 years, people have been asking the same question about Oak Island. What exactly is down there? But when we look at all the evidence found so far together, perhaps an even bigger question comes forward. Who built it? Because this was not just a hole. There were layers of wood, structures that brought water inside, strange construction at Smith's Cove, coconut fibers, and things that at least pointed toward human activity. So 3 questions are still standing today. Who built it? When was it built? And finally, what was all this effort made to protect? The problem is that 200 years of searching have not only tried to find the answers, they have also destroyed many clues along the way. Shafts were dug again and again. Tunnels were built. Water came inside. Some areas collapsed. People changed the old locations by doing new excavations. Many times, so much work was done in a hurry that it became difficult to understand where the original structure was and where the later excavation had started. On top of that, there were problems with money, bad weather, and equipment. And the biggest thing was speed. People came looking for treasure, not answers. So many times, instead of thinking about what the ground was telling them, they simply started breaking into the ground. Maybe that is why today we still have pieces, but not the complete picture. And Oak Island did not even need some huge conspiracy. It already had the sea, time, water, and human greed. Maybe there really is treasure there. Maybe there isn't. But one thing is still extremely interesting. At some point, a person or a group of people definitely put enormous effort into this place, an effort that has kept future generations troubled for more than 200 years. And perhaps that is the real mystery of the story. The next layer. More than 200 years of history. Money pit. Wooden platforms. Coconut fibers. Flood tunnels. Smith's Cove. Tiny gold particles. Parchment. Old wood. 6 deaths. And in the middle of all this, dozens of theories, from Captain Kidd to the Templars. Then came the age of modern technology, scans, seismic surveys, sonar, and core drilling. All of these made some questions even stronger. But one thing is still missing, such a definitive treasure that no debate would be left. So if you got the chance to work on Oak Island for just 1 season, had unlimited funding, and had all of today's modern technology with you, where would you dig? Money pit, Smith's Cove, some unexplored cavity, or a place that no one has seriously thought about before? Because the scariest question about Oak Island is not what is underneath it. The question is, if there really is something there, who was the person who hid it? And why did he make it so difficult for the world to find? If you like such mysterious and true stories, then subscribe to the channel right now, so that as soon as the next layer is opened, you are the first to know the truth.